when you're in ministry, it gets so easy for you to only see people as the roles that they can fill for your ministry, because you're kind of dependent and reliant. So you're always looking like, I need a guitarist, I need another drummer, I need a bass player. And it gets too easy to view people as only that and only what they can serve for your ministry. I struggled with that early on. When I was first in Charlotte, I was very much like, all right, this is what I need. This is how I got to find this person. This is, I had such a shallow view of the people that I was serving with. I learned early on, I don't want my life to just be me filling holes or filling roles in the ministry that I'm doing. I want to pour myself into these friendships, into these relationships, into helping them pursue their dreams. I want to be their biggest champion, their biggest fan of their band, or their biggest fan of whatever they're putting themselves into. Because a lot of times in ministry, we are in survival mode. Yeah. And we're trying, every week we're just trying to get through what's right in front of us. And so to take a step back and realize the bigger picture of we're about building God's kingdom, and God's kingdom is very large.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is worship leader and songwriter Mack Brock.
What up, everybody? Adam here. You're listening to the Ferment podcast. And today my guest is Mack Brock. What up, Mack?
Hey, how's it going, Adam?
Yeah, it's really good to have you on the podcast. Glad that it's working out, even though I guess there's a tropical storm that's knocking out your power this morning.
Yeah, we woke up and it's just one of those nasty days. And the more it's gone on, it's just the wind's gotten crazier and crazier. And now we have no power. So I am sitting in the dark talking to you.
Man, that's commitment. Podcasting commitment. Well, there's definitely some stuff I wanted to talk to you about, but I heard through the grapevine that you were a sports person. So I just felt like we had to start there, because one of the things that's kind of been a running joke and theme on this podcast is how infrequently you can actually talk to musicians about sports.
Yeah, so sports person, I would use that term very loosely. If sports person means somebody that plays sports and is good at any sport, that is an incorrect description of me.
Okay.
But but I pretty much love all sports. I love watching, keeping up with it. Big NBA fan, big NFL fan, big LeBron James fan.
That's right. That's what I had heard. I'd heard through the grapevine that maybe you were a LeBron guy.
Well, you brought up earlier that you're friends with Josh Baldwin. Josh is one of my close friends. I don't know if you've had him on the podcast.
I have.
But Josh, we're very, very tight. And the only strain in our relationship is the conversations we get into about Michael Jordan and LeBron James.
Oh, man. Okay, so let's just go there right now, because it was literally the first thing on my notes. LeBron or MJ?
I mean, all right, just to squelch all the haters.
Yeah.
I probably still lean towards Michael Jordan is probably the GOAT.
Yeah.
I think he's got the greatest, maybe even storyline of the NBA. I think he's amazing. I'm a massive Michael Jordan fan.
That's right. But
I just think the gap between the two is a lot thinner than what people make it out to be. And I get frustrated because I feel like if you meet a Michael Jordan fan, they can't bring themselves to like LeBron. And I'm very much we can like them all.
That's right. I'm with you on that. And I just want to say you're in safe company here, because I am a borderline LeBron apologist.
Oh, same. I tell people that all the time.
It's like,
if I find out that you don't like LeBron, I will spend the next, hour of our conversation trying to just let you know why you should.
That's right. I mean, okay, so one of the things I'll never forget, I have 4 kids, and my oldest, River, he's 18. And one time we were taking a trip together. We were on our way to New York. And the night before, we stayed in the hotel because our flight was early. And it was Game 7 when the Cavs had been down 3-1 to the Warriors.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And LeBron blocks that shot. And my son and I are like, I mean, we are freaking out in the hotel room. And then Kyrie
I love this.
buries the 3. And I thought, when they won that game, I thought, I don't know how you can ever hold anything against LeBron again.
I know. Yeah, so true. I was at a bar in downtown Charlotte, and Charlotte is where Steph is from.
That's right.
My son goes to the school that Steph went to, and so they're always passing out like Steph T-shirts and everything. And I always have to remind him. I was like, hey, we like Steph Curry. He's a great player. We're a LeBron family, just so you know. Don't ever forget it. But I was watching that game, and I was literally the only Cavs fan in that whole place.
There we go. Well, solidarity.
Yes.
Same. So good. Well, okay, you mentioned you like the NBA, and you mentioned that you like the NFL. Just, before we move on, who are your favorite teams?
I know it's tough. Like, we could probably spend the whole podcast talking about LeBron. So I appreciate you trying to move us on to other
That's right.
other topics. I mean, being in Charlotte, I'm a big Panthers fan. But I don't know, maybe this is lame, but I'm one of those sports fans that I just like so many players. I like so many different, not as much teams. I'm just like a person that roots for a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And so I just get, and maybe that's I don't know, maybe that's an offshoot of just being like in the fantasy football and stuff, but I like just keeping up with like a lot of different players and just kind of what's going on.
Well, see, when people ask me about the NBA and the NFL in particular, probably because I'm from Kentucky and I still live here. See, we don't have a pro sports team here. We have
you
college.
Just have a influx of all these players from Kentucky.
That's right.
That played at University of Kentucky.
That's
that
right.
Are
So,
in the NBA scattered.
Yeah. So University of Kentucky is everything here. It's just like people don't understand how big it is. It's like Alabama football or maybe more. It's crazy.
Right.
But
right.
because of that, I just like the league. So I just like the NFL and I just like the NBA. And I don't really care. I'll watch anybody play.
So this year was like a double win for you.
Oh.
You got LeBron and AD.
Well, yeah. And then you have Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo on the other side.
And I didn't know Hero is from Kentucky. What
yeah.
a beast.
Hero's a UK dude. And I just love his attitude. I just think he's beastly. So
it was amazing.
There you go. Well, okay.
I was just thinking about what I was doing when I was 20 years old while I was watching him play.
Yeah. And he's out there like draining shots and snarling into the camera. I love that.
Right. Yeah, me too.
Well, great. Well, I'm glad to hear that you are a sports person, but in order to keep this podcast on track and not lose everyone,
right,
we'll move on.
It goes back to what you said at the beginning, is you don't get to meet a lot of musicians that are interested in discussing sports.
Yeah, that Venn diagram, it doesn't overlap very much.
It's true.
Okay, well, let's do this. This is the normal stuff on the pod. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in South Carolina.
Okay, where at?
In Columbia, so like right in the center.
Yeah.
The most humid part of the state.
Yeah.
And my dad's a pastor, so I kind of grew up in the church, did that whole thing. And then me and my wife got married almost 15 years ago.
Yeah.
We moved up to Charlotte, and we've been here ever since.
Got it. So my next question was, did you come from a family of faith? And you said your dad's a pastor. So does that just mean like church has been a massive part of your life? I mean, is your dad still in the ministry and it's just like a big part of who your family is then?
Yeah, my dad still is. He's still at the same church. I think it's going on 30 years.
That's unbelievable.
Soon. Yeah, like maybe in like the next year or two. Yeah, it's really amazing and inspiring to me, especially, having grown up and started doing ministry myself. Like it's really inspiring to think about my dad and just what the longevity of his ministry and the longevity of what he's been able to do. Because I know in my own life how tough that is.
Yeah.
And how tough it is to just be like, hey, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore.
That's right.
And so I really do look to him in a lot of ways of just like running that long race. But yeah, I grew up, church was a big part of it.
Yeah.
It was, I'm grateful that my parents were very protective of me in the sense that, growing up as a pastor's kid can come with a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
And both my parents were very protective of not putting that on me.
Mm.
And it was never like, hey, here's what your ministry is going to be. Here's what, here's your role in the church once you get older. But it was a very natural thing. In fact, for the longest time, I didn't want to do ministry. And it wasn't out of a place of rebellion or a place of, I think it was just like, I grew up in it, wanted to do something new, wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
And luckily the Lord continued to give me opportunities, even when I wasn't like fully there in my heart, he continued to give me opportunities to like, I don't know, lead worship or be a part of a ministry. And eventually I caught up to my calling.
Yeah.
Eventually like my heart kind of caught up to what the Lord had in store for me.
So what did you think you wanted to do?
And for the longest time, I wanted to work in like the business side of music for like movies and TV.
Got it.
It's like, that's kind of even what I went, I say I went to college for it. It was like part of the major that I was in and had like an internship where I was working at a movie studio, just in like kind of the music supervisor role. Like that's kind of what I wanted to do. So I wanted to be the guy that picked the perfect song for the perfect moment in a movie.
Yeah. But God has some other plan for you.
That he did.
Yeah.
And and it's so funny when I look back, leading worship has always been kind of just like in my life. It's always been something that I've done. And I don't know, like you probably have stuff in your life that's just like, this has always just been kind of like a part. And even if you weren't pursuing it fully, it was just kind of like there in your life. And for the longest time, like that's what like even like worship was, where it's like I was going to school, I was pursuing this other career, but I would still kind of like lead worship at events or like at friends' churches or whatever, just because it was something that I always did.
Yeah.
And even when I moved to Charlotte to be a part of this church up here, I was still kind of like on the fence of like, do I even want to do like, this isn't my career move. This is just kind of like, hey, let's be obedient to what we feel like the Lord is telling us to do right now. And then maybe we'll move to LA in a couple of years, or maybe we'll do this. It was like it wasn't like a long-term like game plan. And like I said, like eventually I feel like the Lord like shifted my heart, and I had like some really special encounters with him that he, I don't know, just kind of like deposited just even that desire of my heart to say like, hey, this is what I've actually called you to do. I know you thought that this was just kind of like an extracurricular activity on the side, but this is like your calling. This is what I've anointed you to do. This is what I've appointed you to do. And so you need to start like pressing into it. And that's, that was kind of like in my mid-20s where I really just had a shift and kind of dove full on like this is where I want to be. And this is like kind of what I want to devote my life to.
Well, part of what I hear in your story, Mack, is, the idea of calling or finding what it is that God is inviting you into. It seems like it was kind of a multi-year wrestle.
It was. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. It was like a wrestling match of, and like I said, like it wasn't a place of rebellion. Like I didn't feel like I was like Jonah running away, but it just I wasn't taking it seriously in my spirit and in my heart. Like I wasn't fully, the best way to put it is like on the fence. Like I wasn't fully diving in and committed to like, this is what I just, even my motivation in my heart and my spirit to put all that into like what the Lord I think really was like calling me to do. And, I always tell people I feel so grateful for his grace in my life, because it was in those seasons, it would have been so easy for him to say like, okay, like if you're not into this, there's a ton of other people that are more qualified and more talented that I can call to do this instead. And for whatever reason, his grace, he didn't do that to me. He had patience for me. He let me wrestle it out with him. And and here I am now.
Well, what I love about this story is actually just the simple fact that it did take you a minute to kind of settle into this role and this invitation from God. Because sometimes I think people live with this idea that, oh, if you have a calling from God, then it's really obvious. And from the time you're 7 and, there's,
right.
Angelic light around you. And it's basically an easy path and it's, fairly obvious and how you have to walk it out. But honestly, most of the people that I've talked to, your story is actually much more in line with how it actually works. There's something there, and it oftentimes takes a year or two or even a decade to really settle into what is it that God was saying to me and what is it that he's leading me into.
Yeah, it was probably a decade, that was probably like a decade of like me being, an adult out of high school, kind of pursuing my life, whatever that was going to look like, before I kind of even fully caught that vision. So it is a wrestling match. And I think the other thing I want to encourage people, if you're listening, like sometimes the wrestle leg doesn't go away either. Like even though like I know this is where I'm at and this is what the Lord has like put in me, I still have days where I'm like, oh, like I said, like I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm tired, I'm beat up, like I'm ready to try something else. And I don't even necessarily see that as like a bad thing. I think it's just part of the process, just relationship with the Lord, and relationship kind of comes with all the goods and the bads and all the ups and the downs and the second guessing and the anxiety and stress and whatever. But then it comes with a lot of peace, and it comes with a lot of like, oh, okay, like I can release this.
Yeah.
I feel good. And so I think I don't know.
I think that's helpful. Process. I think that's really helpful. People need to hear this kind of stuff. This is real life. Let me ask you another question about growing up. Were you always a musician?
So my mom is a musician. My mom's a drummer.
Okay.
She still plays drums.
Like Lenny Kravitz church back in the day, 90s. Lenny always had the girl drummer,
Yeah. No, that's my mom.
Okay,
she
come
rules. on. And she played in like the symphony, Charlotte Symphony and the South Carolina Philharmonic. So she kind of had a wide range of all this stuff. And me and her actually played in a band together back in the day, like when I was in high school.
Okay.
Which is, it's so bizarre looking back, but it was such a good experience for me.
It's funny you mentioned that, because this morning I was talking to one of our mutual friends, and he said, "Hey, you need to ask Mack about his mom, because the first time I met him, he was in a rock band with his mom, and she was the drummer."
Yep, she was, and she freaking rules. She wasn't like I don't know, like she plays hard, she plays aggressive.
Yeah,
it's not kind of what you imagine when you hear the words "mom drummer."
I love it. I love it. I mean, I just I don't know. I feel like we on the podcast, we need you to text us a band pick.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, we need one. I just feel like it.
And so when I was growing up, I wanted to play drums, and she always encouraged me. She was like, well, if you learn another instrument like bass or guitar or something, then me and you can play together.
That is even funnier. Your mom's like, if you play bass, we could be the rhythm section together.
Right. I know. And so I pursued that. It wasn't until I became a parent that I think she was just avoiding having a little kid playing drums in her house. I think that's what she realized. She was like, this is not going to be good for me.
Yeah.
Because I've told Meredith that. I was like, we'll do piano lessons with our kids. We'll do guitar.
Yeah.
Nobody in our family is going to be a drummer.
Yeah. See, my oldest is a drummer, and he started when he was like, I don't know, 10 or 11, and he had him in his room. And so for the last 9 years, it's just been,
it's just now white noise.
Oh, it's utter chaos. And we live on a farm, and we have like 100 acres with the in-laws. And like you can be so far away and into the woods, and if River's playing the drums in the house, you hear it. I mean, it goes out, my friend.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think looking back, I bet my mom was just trying to avoid that.
That is so funny. Love it.
But I started learning music when I was like in middle school, and then I would start playing at the church youth band and all that stuff, and started playing in bands. And so it was always, you know, even from a worship perspective, I was always kind of like in the mix, just even at church playing, even though I wasn't a worship leader or singing the songs, I was always kind of like involved. And then it wasn't until, you know, later years in high school that I got the courage to sing my first solo, I guess,
Yeah.
you know,
So
solo at youth camp.
do you remember what that song was?
It was, do you remember the band Caedmon's Call?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a Caedmon's Call song. And it was, looking back, it's so funny. It was a song called Center Aisle. And I don't know why. I think I just like loved the song, but looking back and reading the lyrics now, I think the song is like pretty dark and heavy. And I just didn't even know it. I was just like, oh, this is a pretty song. Like this is something that I can do.
Oh,
But
so
yeah,
good.
I'm sure that my youth pastor back in the day was like, what is he talking about?
Man, shout out to all youth pastors.
Come on.
Shout
So
out.
much patience.
They
What a
listen,
yeah, what I talk about high calling.
That's it, man. That is it. Okay, so you played in a band with your mom. What kind of band was it?
It was like Christian rock.
Yeah.
You know, it was like we weren't like a worship band, but we would, you know, we'd play at churches and stuff. I mean, we played at clubs and bars and stuff in South Carolina too, but it was definitely, you know, Christian music.
Okay, cool. And then you transition out of that, and you, over the course of a few years, you settle into like leading worship. Like what was that transition like? Was that part of the wrestle? Was that like in that wrestle period?
It was like I said earlier, it's kind of just like something that I always just did.
Yeah.
So I think it was like, because I, you know, was playing in these bands and doing that. And then, you know, a friend of mine would be like, hey, can you lead, like, do you lead worship? Could you just like lead these songs at my church on, you know, or come to this like college ministry and lead on a Wednesday night. And so I would just kind of do that because it was, I don't know, something to do. It was like, you know, just something that I wanted to like help friends with or whatever. And eventually got plugged into some ministries and kind of became more like consistent at that, where I was like actually like involved, like, you know, leading a worship ministry at like churches. And then, like I said, like that led us to moving up to Charlotte, me and my wife, when we first got married, to be a part of Elevation Church that was just starting. And kind of that's when I dove like full on, like, all right, I'm on staff building like a worship ministry, building a worship team. What does that look like? And it was all new to me. But even then, it was still kind of like wrestling. Like, is this even where really like what I want to do? Is this like where I'm supposed to be? And so, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the next thing I'm interested in is, you've been doing this for more than a minute. I mean, you're not an old guy, but you've been doing this for more than a minute. I'm just interested in what keeps you in the worship space. Why are you still a worship leader?
Yeah, man, I really love it.
Yeah.
I really, really love worship. And I think too, there was like an arrogance about me when I was growing up or as a kid. You know, when you're a musician kid, you think that like your taste in music is the dopest. You think that everybody else is lame and you got the coolest sense of music. Like, and so growing up, I was like, I don't want to be a worship leader because like worship music is like kind of lame. You know, I had that kind of arrogance about me. It just in my spirit. It's probably something I didn't say a lot, but in my spirit, I felt that way. And going, you know, talking about a wrestling match, like, man, even when I first started leading worship, the Lord, God, he started just wrecking my heart and really breaking down some hard-heartedness that I had in my spirit towards what it meant, like what worship was. And really had some like very deep, intimate, tough conversations with God about that and tough challenges. And I think through that, I don't know, I just think like worship to me, like just worship music, the genre of worship music to me now is like such a special thing. It's such like a thing that I hold like close to my heart, just, you know, anywhere, like wide range spectrum from like John Mark to like Hillsong, like all sorts of different types of worship music. Like it's just like really special to me. But then also just leading worship and being in a room full of people that are singing these songs together. That's just I don't know, that still to me, that is such a gift. And I'm so grateful that I get to experience that and that I get to be on the front lines of some of that stuff. And so I just really love it.
What up, songwriters? Adam here. Want to tell you something that's coming up in November. November 8 and 11, and then also on 16 and 18, we are hosting a virtual edition of Song Lab. That is a Monday and Wednesday on 2 consecutive weeks. 4 sessions total. These sessions will be inspirational, they will be instructive, and they will be geared towards actually writing. We're going to make space for you to co-write with others in long writing blocks so that after these sessions are finished, everyone will have written on at least 3 different songs. We will be joined by Dee Wilson from Common Hymnal, and then also Leslie Jordan, and maybe you know Leslie from her days in All Sons and Daughters. And we'll also be joined by several of our very best Vineyard worship friends. So if you're wanting to write, if you're wanting to grow, if you're wanting to refine your craft, this is the event for you. Sign up at vineyardworship.com. I want to talk about Charlotte for a minute, if that's okay.
It's the best city.
Yeah.
I love Charlotte.
Okay, so you've been there for 15 years, is that what you said?
14, yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple things I kind of want to get at here. Number one, I like for people just to share a little bit about the cities that they live in and why they love it, because there's just a lot of places in America that we don't really know about. You know, we have places like New York, Chicago, and LA that sort of absorb our national consciousness with what those places are like. But then there's all these other really great places like Charlotte. And I don't think people really know what Charlotte's about. So I'd love for you to just to share with us a little bit about it.
Charlotte is honestly, it's like my favorite city in the country. Like I love this place. And I love, I love those big cities too. I've spent a lot of time, spent a summer living in New York. I spent a semester living in LA, and really for the longest time, like felt like, all right, that's where I'm headed. I'm going to go to one of these places and plant myself. And when the Lord brought us to Charlotte, I just fell in love with it. It's such a cool, I don't know. Charlotte's one of those places it's got a lot of stuff to do and a lot of things kind of going on. We've got some sports teams, got the Hornets, we got the Panthers. We, have great music venues, great restaurants, great bars, but it's really still got like a small city vibe. So it has all these things that, big cities have and things to do, but the traffic's not too bad.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
just even like the way the city's built, I don't know. It's, you got like kind of the center city, like uptown area. And then just like another circle around that is kind of just like all like the suburbs and stuff. But it's just easy to get places. It's quick to get in and out of downtown. So I don't know, you can live here and there's so much to do. And the people here are nice, kind, kind Southern people. But it doesn't feel like we're, living in this massive city that overwhelms you.
Yeah. Well, this is really the main thing I wanted to talk about with you when it comes to Charlotte. I was talking with another friend about all the bands and musicians that have come out of that city. And it's kind of stunning. And I don't know that a lot of people have really put this together. I don't really hear it talked about. But, in the Charlotte area, you have John Mark and if you're a real Charlottean, you know about Mark Mathis.
Oh, I love Mark Mathis.
And you have everything that's happened at Elevation. And you have the Helzers and Josh Baldwin. There's all of we could just keep going, right?
Yeah.
And then you're there and you still live there. I guess I'd be really interested to hear what you think is going on.
Man, I think that when I first moved to Charlotte and we didn't know anybody, I didn't know any musician, and we're like trying to build this worship team and we're trying to just like find people. There's a history of musicians kind of being raised up. Yeah. And so just even Morningstar, yes. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're, they're in Charlotte, and there were so many, I don't know. I credit a lot of just the history of musicians in Charlotte, or at least what we're seeing now from the seeds that even they planted years and years ago, because so many musicians have come out of that and gone, doing like amazing things. And so I think that there's just like a faithful collection of people that are like, we're going to start building, this culture of musicians, or this culture of excellence in like the craft that we bring and the offerings that we bring and the skills that we bring. And now we're able to just even see a lot of fruit from that. And you're right, man. There's such a collection of musicians here.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
From like worship leaders, songwriters, but just also just like the whole wide spectrum of like guitarists, keys, drums, whatever. Like it's so, there's such a deep pool and deep well of musicians here, and it's just really inspiring. And a lot of really cool bands are coming up now through the ranks. I have a friend, some friends of mine started a record label called Four Finger, and just even what they're doing with the musicians and the bands in Charlotte, it's just like a really cool like local scene too.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes a city a real city, is when there's some kind of actual music scene.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and there's stuff that's happening at a really like large like national level, but then there's stuff that's happening at a just like local level that's like really awesome and like such a good community.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I guess I wanted to bring it up was, I just want people to know, because there are bands, there are musicians, there's worship leaders, there's non-worship music that comes from Charlotte. Right. And I think people, they should know about it. But then also, especially, I am a pastor, especially for people in the church, I think Charlotte is an example of what churches could help grow in their cities.
Yeah.
It's one of the,
I love that.
It's one of the things that I've just always looked at it and gone, if we will take interest in our artists, musicians, and creatives, if we'll make a space for them, if we'll put a little money behind them, if we will give them some freedom, because I know a little bit of the Morningstar story, and I know some of the other pieces of the Charlotte story, and I know that one of the things that kind of surrounds a lot of it is just there's an unusual amount of freedom given to songwriters and worship leaders and musicians to like own their craft and to own songwriting and to own their artistry. And I just think it's a beautiful invitation.
I love that you're bringing that up, because that's something I talk to a lot of worship leaders about when I travel is, when you're in ministry, it gets so easy for you to only see people as the roles that they can fill for your ministry, and it gets too easy, especially in the worship space, because you're kind of dependent and reliant on talented musicians to, do your ministry. So you're always looking like, I need a guitarist, I need another drummer, I need a bass player. And it gets too easy to view people as only that and only what they can serve for your ministry. And I struggled with that early on. When I was first in Charlotte, I was very much like, all right, this is what I need. This is how I got to find this person. This is, and I had such a shallow view of the people that I was serving with. And I learned early on, like, man, like I don't want my life to just be me filling holes or filling roles in the ministry that I'm doing. Like I want to pour myself into these friendships, into these relationships, into helping them pursue their dreams and helping them like I want to be their biggest champion, you know, their biggest fan of their band,
Yeah.
or their biggest fan of like whatever they're like putting themselves into. And I don't know. I just love hearing you say that, because I do think that that's a struggle in ministry, because a lot of times in ministry, we are in like survival mode.
Yeah.
And we're trying, you know, every week we're just trying to get through what's right in front of us. And so to take a step back and realize the bigger picture of like, no, like we're about like building God's kingdom, and God's kingdom is like very large.
That's
and there's
right.
lots of, you know, there's lots of fingers that can kind of like spread out and go throughout in how that would look.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main pastoral temptations, is to just see people with respect to what they can offer a Sunday morning.
So much.
But you're right. God's kingdom is like taking interest in people for who they are the rest of the week as well.
Totally.
Yeah, I love that. Well, anyway, it's just something I've noticed over the years, and I'm glad you're still living in Charlotte, because I think there's something very special there, and I hope that more people will see it, take notice of it, enjoy the
It's
fruit.
such a good place. When me and Meredith, you know, I kind of stepped out of my staff role at Elevation 3.5 years ago. Felt a little bit like a blank slate of, all right, well, where do you want to go? And what do you know, we could go anywhere. Should we move to Nashville? Should we, you know, move to California? And neither one of us really wanted to leave.
Yeah.
we both love Charlotte so much, and thankfully the Lord didn't want us to leave either. So
That's a good thing.
it's a good place.
That's a good thing. Well, hey, why don't we take a really hard right turn here for a second, if that's okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so I was reading the email from the person who sort of connected us for this podcast, and in the email they mentioned that you and your wife were foster parents, and I thought that is so interesting. I'd love for you just to share with us about that, because that's not something we often hear on this podcast.
Yeah, that's kind of a new thing for our family.
Yeah.
We've been fostering. We got licensed right at the start of the pandemic. So we got licensed in April, and we got our foster son that's living with us now in August, or no, I guess it was July. And so we've had him for a handful of months now, and it's been a challenge, but it's been like more so than that. It's been such a blessing, like for our family. It's been a blessing for our kids. It's something that the Lord has kind of, you know, he kind of put it on our hearts a while back. And, you know, I feel like the theme of this podcast is wrestling match.
That's right.
Because, you know, I think a lot of times, anytime the Lord puts something on your heart, you could it's easy to just get in that zone of like wrestling with him. Like, are you sure? I don't know. That sounds inconvenient. It doesn't sound like that's going to align with like my dreams and goals. You sure that's what you want me to do? And we had a wrestling match too, but ultimately, I don't know, like as soon as we just even made the decision, like, hey, I think that this is what we're supposed to do, man, there's so much peace and affirmation. And so it's been a fun journey so far.
Well, I just as soon as I read that, I was really moved by it, because it's just not what a lot of people do. And, you know, there's so many kids who, what they really need is they need somebody just to give them an actual place.
And they just need a safe place.
Oh my gosh.
They just need, you know, safety and I think for me too, just even you bringing that up, like I had the only thing I knew about like foster families or what a foster, you know, what the foster system was from like movies and TV shows. And in that I had realized, man, like I've got this like really distorted view of like, it's just like a really gnarly system and it's just all dreary and bad and whatever. Like it was a kind of like a dark cloud of like what foster, you know, even just the word like foster care felt like. And I realized that, and I was like, man, like I got to fix my mentality. And the more that I even learned about it from our process of getting licensed and the classes that we took, man, it's such a gift to so many kids, and so many kids are like in need of that. And even now, like we're learning, you know, when we got licensed back in April, that's when the world shut down. And so for several months, there wasn't even, you know, schools or daycares or whatever, the places that are normally the ones that come in and step in and say, hey, we think this kid needs to be placed in foster care or somebody needs to step in, those weren't in place. And so for several months, there were very few, like even referrals. That makes sense, because nobody knew what was going on because everybody's just kind of like locked in their houses. And now that, schools are getting back into place, there's like an influx of like need, there's an influx of like, there's just a big need for it. And us like learning just more about it. I don't know. I've been really encouraged by the process and encouraged of like, it's not as overwhelming as I thought it would be. Foster care was something that the Lord kind of like put on my wife's heart before he put on my heart.
Yeah.
And I was the one that was like, oh, that makes me nervous.
Yeah.
That sounds like very inconvenient. I like my personal time. I'm very selfish with my time. Like I went through all that kind of natural stuff. And what I've learned just even through this process, and it's something that I think I can look back at our whole marriage and see how the Lord has done this, is that the moment that we say yes to inconvenience, or that we say yes to things that we feel like would be too stretching for us, the Lord extends our bandwidth, and he gives us the bandwidth to say, yeah, like to be able to do the things that he's calling us to be obedient to. Because both me and my wife, we have crazy jobs. We both travel a lot. We both are kind of scattered, not normal 9-to-5 jobs. And so we're like, how are we even going to make this work? And I don't know. I think when you're committed to just following the Lord, or you're committed to like saying yes, he's committed to extending your bandwidth and kind of like growing what your capacity is and what you can handle.
That's beautiful. Thanks for telling that story. I think that's really important. Well, here's what I want to talk about next, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me about new music. You have a record coming out.
Yes, I do. We all had to find something to do. We were cooped up in our houses.
Yeah, that's right.
Initially, it was kind of always the plan this summer to record a new record. And I wanted to do it at our church, and just have kind of like a live, like worship night and just kind of capture it. Obviously we weren't able to do that, but still, I don't know. I think that at least for me personally, I found like I would much rather be in a live setting than in a studio setting for the songs that I'm singing and the songs that I'm doing. And so we kind of did a live worship experience. We just didn't have anybody there with us.
Yeah.
And it was like, me and a bunch of our friends and a bunch of the musicians that I've, played with for years and years. And we just captured this day in August where we just got together and we kind of like, I don't know, just like worship together. And so that's what this new record is. It comes out in November 20th. And I don't know. It's been one of the most special projects that I've been a part of. There's just something really like sweet about it to me.
Yeah.
I don't know a better way to describe it. it's been a really sweet process, and the songs have been really like special and tender to me. And I'm just excited about it. I'm grateful. I'm grateful anytime I get to make music and anytime I get to like put something out. And so just the fact that I have like another thing that the Lord has like allowed us to put out into the world gets me excited.
Talk to me about the maybe the thematic core. Is there one? Is there kind of a center to this record?
Yeah. So the album's called Space. For me, I think that, I don't know, that idea encapsulates like so many things about our relationship with Jesus. And kind of the most basic, or maybe not the most basic, but maybe the forefront theme to me is that there's always space with Jesus. And there's always space to come to him, to bring all the weights that we're carrying, to bring all the baggage that we're carrying. There's never going to be a time when he's not capable or doesn't have the capacity to just take all that stuff from us. And so that's just like, that's such a freeing concept in my life that I've had to learn and wrestle with and like trust God with. That's like the biggest thing I want people to take away. Like if there's anything that I can like tell anybody ever, it's like, hey, like this isn't too much for Jesus. You're not too much for Jesus. What you're carrying isn't too much for Jesus. He's got the capacity for it. And so a lot of the songs kind of deal with that, and deal with like, I don't know. I think I'm a person that I'm an optimist, I like to see like the best in people. I like to see the best in situations. And so I do want to like celebrate and sing like kind of from a place of victory or from a place of like positivity. But I'm also just very aware of like the difficulties of life. I'm very aware of like the hardships that happen in people's lives. And I think that it's really good to acknowledge that and to acknowledge that life can be a battle. Life can be a struggle. And the hope isn't even necessarily like, but you're going to see a victory. You're going to be on the mountaintop on the other side. Like my hope, the thing that I get more hope out of is like, but even in the valley and even in the middle of the mess that you're in, like God's with you.
That's right.
And there's somebody with you that is helping you through this.
Yeah.
And you will see the other side, but even when you're in the middle of it, you gotta believe that you're not alone.
That's right.
And so a lot of this record is just, I don't know, it's a reminder to me of that. It's a reminder, I want to remind people of that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me, Mack, just as you were sort of outlining maybe the central themes of the record, I can't help but see kind of an obvious connection to some of the things that you and your wife have done this year. You're talking about Jesus making space for you and no matter what's going on. And then the thing we just talked about a moment ago is that you and your wife have made some space for someone.
Yeah, man, it's true.
It's hard for me not to see that connection right away.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you're right. That's special.
Yeah, that's really special. Well, hey, let's do this as we wrap up. Let's do some quick hitters.
Okay.
Old guitars or new guitars?
I'll go with old.
There you go. Okay. Are you constantly writing or do you write in spurts?
I try to constantly write at least a little bit. I'll go through spurts where I'm like writing every day. And I'll go through seasons where it's like very much like always on my calendar to write. After I've maybe recorded a record, I'll write like once a week or try to always have that muscle going, but it's not as often.
That's right. Pizza or tacos?
Ooh, thin crust pizza.
For the win.
Yeah, I think thin crust pizza.
Travel or coming home?
Coming home.
That's a good answer. Okay, last question. And this is the one we ask everyone on the podcast for this season.
LeBron.
Yes, correct answer. Correct answer.
MJ or LeBron?
MJ or LeBron. Yeah. No. This is our final question. What are you dreaming about these days? What's the dream in your heart?
Man.
And it doesn't have to be epic. It could be pretty small.
Yeah. I think that this year for everybody, this year has been a year of like recalibrating and figuring out like what's going on? What does my life look like? What's happening? And during that season or during this past year, I think like my biggest dream has just been investment in my family and investment in like what I'm doing like for my kids and for my wife. And so I don't even know how that translates to like, this is like what my dream is as much as I guess my dream is that the seeds that I'm planting right now, that I'm like learning to plant right now, just for the fruit of that in my family to just be so evident, a decade from now.
That's beautiful. Great answer. Well, Mack, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Man, this has been so good, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime.
I need to come out and hang out on all that land you got.
Listen, it's an open invitation. And, you're already friends with the Hurchins. So we'll have them come over and you just bring your wife and kids and
maybe next March Madness, if there is a March Madness.
If there's a March Madness, you come over, we'll drink some wine. It'll be a great time. We'll treat you right.
I love it.
All right, man.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
Yeah, that's right. Peace.
Hi everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Events Director for Vineyard Worship. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple of ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.